Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And we are at the start of Spring Training 2039, not the most eventful off season for our Buffalo Wings. We do still have some money to spend on free agents or players that we may pick up in trade in the coming months. I did mention at the end of our last episode that I was intrigued by the bat of Braden Taylor, 36, soon to be 37-year-old guy who has won a Gold Glove, an All-Star Award, and a Silver Slugger during his career. Although to be fair, they're all well in his past. Feel like he's got as a left-handed hitter with a solid batting profile and a particularly interesting batting profile against right-handed pitching. Feel like he's a guy who could help our team, but thinking about things realistically, if we were to bring him on board, given his defensive limitations, he would likely be taking playing time from Juan Estrada, Joe Gallagher, or Joe Edwards. And although as a left-handed hitter, could certainly argue on the margin that he'd be a little bit of an upgrade offensively against right-handed pitching to either Gallagher or Edwards. I don't think for a wrecked 36-year-old, even though we've got the money to bring him on board, that Taylor is someone we're going to pursue. Since he turned 30 years old, over his last 6 years in the majors, he's played over 87 games just once. So that wrecked physicality of his has certainly manifested itself with some problems. He has been a pretty productive offensive player every year until this past season. But as I said, he's soon to be 37 years old. He's wrecked physically, and he's coming off by far the worst year of his career. I think I'm going to go with the younger guys that, while they may not be quite as productive against right-handed pitching, are at least healthy guys, young guys, guys who might have some upside as opposed to someone who's probably on the way down. So I don't think we're going to add any additional players in free agency right now. We do have, as you can see, 49 players in camp. So we've got a ton of pitchers in camp. We're going to go with a 6-man rotation. The new thing to focus on will likely be that Eric Barbarito will be taking over for us as our number 5 starter, most likely next year, assuming he beats out another youngster, David Espinoza, for that spot, taking the spot in the rotation that Isidro Ochoa has had the last few years. And Nate Ruckel will be taking over as our stopper for Lorne Walborn, the traitorous Canadian who decided to leave us even after we did make an offer to him and go and play with the Los Angeles Dodgers for more money than we were going to pay him. Ruckel is younger. I think Ruckel is better. So good luck in Los Angeles, Lorne Walborn. You're dead to me. Offensively, just a couple of new guys to potentially mix in. Juan Romero, as well as Nelson Rojas, are two guys that we picked up in trades this year that we're going to mix in. We're also going to take a look at Rule 5 acquisition Jorge Romero, and a lot of the youngsters on our team as well in spring training as we try to figure out what our 26-man roster is going to look like. The most interesting battle in spring training is probably going to be between Jorge Berrios and Mitch Houlihan as to who ends up being Andres Medina's backup this year. And it ended up being an excellent spring for the Buffalo Wings, 18-8 record for what it's worth, one of the top records in all of baseball in this preseason. Most importantly, though, no injuries among the 49 guys that we've had in camp at this point as we finish up our time in Florida. So now it's just a matter of figuring out which 23 players won't be joining us north in Buffalo when the season begins in a few days. About 20 of those decisions will probably be pretty easy. The last handful, though, will be pretty impactful as to what the final roster ends up looking like, and also be something that we spend some time thinking about. So when we get to the point where we're making those decisions, that's likely when we'll check in next. And with our pitching staff, it's been relatively easy to get down to 15 players. Issue is that we need to get down to 13. 5 starters were pretty much, I don't want to say set in stone, but we were pretty confident what this pitching staff was going to look like as spring training began, unless we had some injuries. Top 4, exactly the same as a year ago, with Barajas, who's now 30 years old, Shazier, Mendoza, and Estrada. And as I talked about earlier in the episode, Eric Barbarito is going to get the shot at 24 years old to be our number 5 starter. Several of the bullpen spots are pretty much set as well. Joe Scott, last year's Mariano Rivera Award winner in his first year with Buffalo after he traded for him, is back as our closer. Nate Ruckel is going to take over for the traitorous Lorne Walborn as our stopper. He had an exceptional spring for us. Juan Veliz and Elvin Jimenez going to be back in setup roles, and then Mike Waters is going to be back on the roster as a middle reliever. So there are 5 of the relief spots. So that leaves us with 5 players for 3 spots on the pitching staff. David Espinoza, who is out of options and has split each of the last 2 years between Albany and Buffalo at 25 years old, the former third-round draft pick, is going to get an opportunity to be a long reliever for us this year, so he's going to make the team. So essentially we are in a situation with Inahiro Miyake, who we picked up in a trade with Colorado a little over a year ago, and Ben Borgen, a lefty who we picked in the 6th round back in 2035, are fighting with a couple of Rule 5 acquisitions, Mike Ashley and Juan Puente, for the final 2 spots on the roster this year. And the first cut is going to be one of our lefties. We like the fact that we're going to have a pretty well-balanced bullpen with 4 lefties and 4 righties. But to get there, we're going to need to send one of the lefties out. Because Inamihiro Miyake was pretty effective with us a year ago, putting up a 1.88 ERA and over a strikeout per inning. And he does technically still have option years left, but because he was so effective last year, we're going to give him the shot. Ben Borgen, who still has option years left and we think can improve his stuff a little bit, is the guy that at least to start the year we are going to send down to AAA. Having him down in AAA will also ensure that he can start every 5th day and get a little more innings pitched under his belt than he would if he was being used as an occasional long reliever out of the majors. So Borgen is going to get demoted to AAA Albany. Miyake's going to make the team, and now it's just a matter of deciding between the 2 Rule 5 acquisitions, Juan Puente and Mike Ashley, as to which one we would like to keep up. Ashley, 25-year-old, has not pitched above Double-A ball. Like the fact that he does have a 4-pitch arsenal, not really enough stamina to be a true starter, but a guy who looks like he could be an above-average major league reliever with what he brings. Juan Puente, a little older at 26 years old. Stuff not quite as good, but his movement and his control are both better. He is a guy who does have some major league experience over each of the past 2 seasons. His sinker and his fastball are really good. I think we're going to keep Puente. He certainly did much better in spring training compared to Ashley. So we are going to release Ashley back to the Brewers. Juan Puente is the final guy who's going to make our pitching staff this year. And these 13 gentlemen are the 13 who will be coming north to Buffalo with us from spring training. And most of the cuts, as far as our everyday players, were fairly easy as well. We've got 2 decisions left to make, down to 16 position players, but that does include the two-way player, Juan Estrada, who's already on our pitching staff. So we really only need to cut 2 more players. First big decision is who's going to be our backup catcher to Andres Medina. The options are Mitch Houlihan, who we picked up in a trade with Pittsburgh last year. He is a guy who has been in the majors for 3 seasons now, and he has a .339 career batting average in the majors, and he's also a pretty darn good defensive catcher. The other option is Jorge Berrios, international free agent signing of ours in 2032. Batted just .210 last year in Albany, which is kind of what he does, but he did have 21 homers, and he has an incredible eye over the course of his career at this point. He's a .201 career hitter, but he's got a .405 on-base percentage, so he is incredibly adept at drawing walks. Think of some of the players in Major League history who have had that skill. He's not a Ricky Henderson or a Barry Bonds, but there are some players over the years who have just had a proclivity towards being able to find their way on base despite not necessarily being Hall of Fame type hitters. And Berrios, I think, is going to join that club in the future. But it is going to be something that he does in the future. We're going to send him down to AAA, ensure that he'll be playing every day. The fact that Houlihan is better defensively, and he is a somewhat proven at this point .300 hitter at the major league level, despite the way his ratings look, going to give him the first shot to back up Mr. Medina. So now the question is, who is the next guy to be cut? And I'm pretty comfortable with Gallagher, Heiner, Seifu, Tiley, Edwards, Anderson, and Hull all being back among our infielders. So what that means is someone among Elmquist, Romero, Rojas, and Broughton is not going to make the roster. And 3 of the decisions were relatively easy. Juan Romero was a big trade we made this past offseason. He's a guy who's been a well above average offensive player each of his 2 years in the majors with the Braves. We think that he could be a big bat in the middle of our lineup. So Romero's going to make the team, as well as our 2 holdovers. Mike Broughton is a good defensive player. Did not hit the way we hoped he would last year, but still looking at his profile, think he can be a pretty useful offensive player against right-handed pitching, and he's a guy who can really play any outfield position if we want him to. Similarly, Ben Elmquist is a guy who we feel pretty decent defensively at any position in the outfield, and he hit .282 with a 117 WRC plus for us a year ago in his first full years in the majors. So Elmquist, Juan Romero, and Mike Broughton will be back. That leaves us with a decision with Nelson Rojas, the youngster who we also picked up in a trade this offseason. Doesn't have a ton of seasoning, even though he's 24 years old. Like his glove and pretty solid outfield range. He was really good in AAA last year, but he really stunk in a decent sample size of 241 at-bats in the majors. We think his contact, his gap power, his home run power, and his avoid strikeouts could all get a little bit better. Think that we like that power bat. But the other option is another guy who's got a potentially decent power bat, and that's Jorge Romero. Rule 5 acquisition we picked up from the New York Yankees. He's never played in the major leagues before. Left-handed hitter who looks like he could be a useful bat against right-handed pitching. Don't know how much playing time he's really going to get with us, but he was pretty effective last year in AAA. Very effective, quite honestly, with a 173 WRC plus. And I'm going to make a decision that surprises me, but we are going to keep the Rule 5 guy Romero up, and we're going to send Rojas down to AAA, where he can hopefully play center field every day, maybe get some good coaching and get a little better. I do feel that with the right-handed hitting Elmquist and the left-handed hitting Broaden, we can cover center field defensively decently without Rojas. Certainly envisioned him as a potential starting center fielder when we picked him up, but Three Quarters Badger has commented on this in comments to previous episodes. He is a guy who's going to struggle to make contact and struggle to avoid striking out. He's never going to be great at either of those things, but I think I'd rather have him hopefully improving in AAA, and at least that'll give us a look at Jorge Romero at the major league level. Don't think he's going to be a superstar, but wouldn't mind him becoming someone whose rights we have if we can keep him up for the year. Still a guy with 3 option years left, so if we get to the 90 Rule 5 active days left and his rights become ours, we'll have a little more flexibility going forward in future seasons, given that he's got some option years left on top of this season. So we are going to send Rojas down to AAA Albany. And now it's just a matter of figuring out what we want our lineups to actually look like against right and left-handed pitching. And we've figured out what our starting lineups are going to look like. Against right-handed pitchers, Deshaun Seifu, the living legend, will be pursuing a 12th consecutive season, leading the National League in stolen bases this year. Very conceivable that he will pass Lou Brock for second all-time in the month of April. And if he stays healthy, he will likely join Rickey Henderson as the only players in the 1,000 stolen base club before the end of this season. Taking a look at Seifu's ratings, we think his speed is still almost as good as it's ever been. Contact and gap power still very good. Not going to strike out a ton. So hopefully the Iron Man in his soon-to-be age 35 season will have another big year for us. Juan Estrada, the two-way guy, back in his traditional spot in the 2-hole against right-handed pitching. Mike Heiner, the number 3 hitter. Newcomer Juan Romero playing left field and hitting cleanup. Mike Broaden going to be playing center field for the time being for us. Hopefully can get a little more offense out of him than we did a year ago. Joe Gallagher, who's led the team in home runs in ribbies both of his 2 seasons in the majors, will be hitting 6th in playing DH. Steve Anderson back in a platoon at shortstop. Joe Edwards is our third baseman. And Andres Medina, once again our catcher. Against left-handed pitching, Seifu will still be leading off. Ben Elmquist in a platoon with Broaden will play center field. Juan Romero moves up to the 3-hole. Joe Gallagher at DH moves all the way up to the 4-hole. Joe Edwards pivots over to first and moves up to the 5-hole. Tegan Tiley in the lineup at third base. Andres Medina moves up to the 7 spot. Mike Heiner, the only lefty in the lineup against left-handed pitching, hits eighth and plays right field. And then Tim Hull in the platoon with Anderson will be playing shortstop and batting number 9 against left-handed pitching this year. The only two players who won't be starting at some point are our backup catcher, Mitch Houlihan, and then the Rule 5 acquisition, Jorge Romero. There was a part of us that honestly wanted to give the left-handed hitting Romero an opportunity to start against right-handed pitching. It's just that realistically, the way to do it was to take Joe Gallagher out of the lineup. And although Gallagher is not a great contact hitter against right-handed pitching, he still has been a reasonably productive offensive player against right-handed hitting the first 2 years of his career. Combined for his career, he's got a 112 WRC plus. A little worse against right-handed pitching at 108, but he's still been an above-average offensive player, and just felt that taking the guy who, as we talked about, has led our team in homers and ribbies for 2 consecutive years since Shamar Jenneret left, out of the starting lineup against right-handed pitching for a guy that we just picked up in the Rule 5 draft was a bit too ambitious even for me, even though Romero is a left-handed hitter. Looks like he could be a useful bat against right-handed pitching, but just not the same kind of power that Mr. Gallagher will bring. So something to keep an eye on going forward, but we've got our 26-man roster, and it'll be time to get the season underway very shortly. But before we finish off this episode and really get the season underway in our next episode, SIMDA had a couple of days to opening day, and it's time to see the preseason predictions. Over in the American League, the Yankees are expected to repeat as AL East winners. Minnesota expected to take the American League West. Seattle, with a pitching staff that has been excellent for several years, has typically been the best team out there in recent seasons. In the National League East, I guess we're expected to tie for the lead, so that would be an 8th consecutive division title, although it would be a first shared one if we do end up following the predictions and tying with the Braves with 96 wins. The Expos expected to be just 4 behind Atlanta and Buffalo this year. And the Reds with 94 wins are expected to win the National League West. Looking at some of the top hitters expected this year, no Buffalo Wings among the top hitters. And only one Buffalo Wing expected to be among the top pitchers, Alexis Mendoza, who's going to be playing his 3rd full season in the majors, expected to have a nice year for us this year. But looks like another season where the balance of Buffalo is expected to result in a very good year on the field, but not expected to have too many players with very dominant seasons. And we will find out how true and accurate those predictions actually are in our coming episodes. Until then, I'll make this point here, though. Juan Toledo, we did expect the guy that we just picked up as an international amateur free agent to quickly become the top prospect in our system, and you can see he certainly is viewed that way at this point, viewed as the number 9 prospect in all of baseball at 16 years old. Certainly going to be spending this entire season at our international complex, but glad to see him as a highly regarded prospect, and having him on board has been the big boost to getting our minor league system to now rank 8th out of 32 overall. Toledo, who we mentioned at the complex, Barbarito in the majors, Amezcua, Lance, and Nava all in A or high A right now, but we haven't actually set up all those teams officially. We're going to be working on that between episodes. And then Devin Cabuto is on the borderline of being a AAA player, but he only pitched one game in AA last year, so likely to split this year between AA and AAA. But the former first round pick in 2035 is not too far away from hopefully being able to help us at the major league level as another young pitcher. And Jim Lance, who was the second round pick in 2036, as I mentioned, likely to start in A ball or high A ball. Hasn't been an incredibly effective minor league pitcher in terms of his stats, walking a lot of people. But if he's able to harness that control, still think that the 21-year-old could become a pretty interesting player for us down the line. So in addition to hopefully getting this team back to the playoffs for a 12th consecutive year, we're going to continue hopefully working on developing some of these top prospects to help keep this team in contention for many years to come. So we will say play ball on the 2039 season in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.